Yes, we're live.
Yes, I think we're live.
We are live. Yes. So, hello everyone. I will be your host today, Shapita Thomas. I'm the communications officer at ChildLink, Guyana, and I'd like to formally welcome everyone joining. And extend advanced gratitude to the persons joining on social media who would like and share this live. I would also like to specially welcome our speakers for today. Today, our roundtable discussion is in observance of the 16 days of activism for the elimination of violence against women and girls. And this year, 16 days of activism for gender based violence is observed under the theme Orange the World, Fund, Respond, Prevent, Collect. So today I have an amazing panel with me who will share with you. And today we will be discussing on preventing violence against women and girls in Guyana. At this time, I'd like to ask the members on my panel, in no particular order, to kindly introduce themselves and share with us their general thoughts on the 16 days of activism.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon again. It's a privilege to be here with my esteemed colleagues. And my name is Akila Doris. I'm the manager of the Sexual Offences and Domestic Violence Policy Unit here in the Ministry of Human Services and Social Security. So the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence is a very important time for us. And I firmly believe that we should have a 365 days of activism against gender-based violence, but it's a significant time when we focus all of our efforts on increasing the awareness and not just increasing the awareness, but demonstrating our commitment to action by acting, by investing funds, by ensuring that we have the data to inform our planning, our programming, and so forth. So joining the rest of the world for this very important campaign, I think it's very symbolic. I think and I believe that it's important that we continue to be the voice for the voiceless. We are able to reach numerous persons during this time, and of course, you would have been following us on Facebook to see the numerous activities we've been having as it relates to creating the awareness. We've been interacting in a safe way with our masks on, observing COVID rules, but we've been interacting with persons within the street, at the marketplaces, at businesses. We've been interacting with our partners because we constantly have to be coming back to the drawing board to be revisiting and assessing, our programs and our policies to ensure that the services that we provide are very responsive to the needs of persons requiring these services. So it's a privilege to join my colleagues here, the rest of Guyana and the world over, as we demonstrate our commitment. As the theme says, Orange the World Fund, we demonstrate our commitment by investing resources, not just financial, but other forms of resources, respond, ensure that our systems are responsive, ensure that our systems are tailored to the needs of victims and survivors, ensure that we continue as much as we focus on intervening after the incidents would have been committed. It's important that we also invest in prevention. So it's important, and then we collect data to inform everything that we do. So it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Ms. Doris. So I'll ask another panel member to introduce himself and give your thoughts on the 16 days of activism.
Okay, I suppose I will go. So my name is Ayo Dalgety Dean. I'm the founder and managing director of Blossom Inc. For me, we do this job year round and has for the last 6 years. We operate child advocacy centers, which works with children, really a lot of girls who are victims of sexual exploitation and severe physical abuse. So this is part of our day-to-day lives. We also have an extended service to the migrant community. And again, it's where we support a lot of women and girls who experience sexual and gender-based violence. So for us, it's a lot about continuing with intervention and prevention in order to meet the needs and improve the lives of the. Thank you.
Thank you, Ayo. We can go with you, Mr. Akhtar.
Okay. So good afternoon and warm greetings from UNICEF to all of you panel members here. Those who are on social media in Guyana or outside of Guyana watching this live discussions. UNICEF is very pleased to be part of this discussion, especially on the theme Orange Your Space and Orange Your World. I believe this is a symbolic gesture marking the 16 days of activism against the gender-based violence, but it reminds all of us for our responsibilities and commitment for ending gender-based violence. I think it also calls for action, not from those agencies which are so-called working on that, but it requires action from all of us as a, whether international organization, a state organization, non-state actors, civil society organizations, faith-based organizations, or as an individual in the society, in the family. Everybody has to take it seriously to respond to this issue, which is very much prevalent and visible in our society in different forms. We believe that gender-based violence can happen and happening anywhere in the world in all settings, but mostly it is aggravated and is more grimming in emergencies. And we can see that there are many cases which shows that there is an increase during the COVID pandemic time in different settings. Like other partner organizations which are here, UNICEF is committed to addressing the gender-based violence, and it is at the center of our mandate to protect children and women from gender-based violence. If we see the data coming up, different surveys, different studies, it shows that there are many factors in the society which are guided by different norms and cultural practices. And I think when we go into more discussions, we would like to see how those issues are being discussed and what kind of approach we should have to address these issues. But from UNICEF side, I believe that there is a need to bring a proper coordination mechanism. We need to find a funding mechanism to bridge the gaps, to design a solid prevention and response services related to ending the violence, and also engaging different stakeholders which may not be engaged at this point of time, but we need to find how best we can engage them. They can play important role. And I believe, community-based organizations, faith-based organizations are very critical in addressing such kind of, issues and bringing positive change in the society. From our side, we believe that, as a part of what we are talking about, 16 days of activism, and Madam Akila mentioned that it should be 365 days. It's important that we maintain the continuity of such mandates to discuss at different forums, to design different interventions, because we feel that we need to collectively speak up about these issues. No violence is justifiable and acceptable, and that those should be addressed in a proper manner every time, everywhere. These are some of the initial thoughts I wanted to share from UNICEF side, and we are happy to listen to all speakers and also to see how these are being discussed and responded in pragmatic manners. Thank you, and over to you.
Yes, thank you so much, Mr. Akhtar.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I am Omati Madri, and I'm with ChildLink. This afternoon, it's really useful and really a good opportunity for us to get together with our partners and really talk a bit more on gender-based violence and what are some of the things that we would like, our viewers, our children, our women and men and boys also to hear about what they can do. What are some of the roles that we can all take in preventing gender-based violence? We know that gender-based violence happen largely at home, within the community, behind closed doors, behind or hidden from many times from those who can really take action. But yet again, we know those who can take action are still a small percentage as against those who are finding so many different reason, perhaps difficulties in themselves to report and to support others who want to report. And so we know that during this particular period of COVID, that the level of awareness we would have taken, all of us would have taken in the various communities in where we work and in and among the target groups, that has significantly reduced as a result of COVID. But we hope that as we continue this discussion and as we continue to find new ways of working in COVID and reaching families and reaching communities, that more and more we can create safer spaces for women and girls to grow and to really be able to to have that inner strength and to be able to find new ways to report and to say no to violence. I think when we look at the stats, we recognize that more women, more girls are reporting, but there's still a lot more work to do. For those who are reporting, they are setting a tradition that they're not going to accept violence, any form of violence. And that is good. We must congratulate and we must help those who are reporting. And we must help them to set a wide and a bigger tradition of no violence should be tolerated. I'll leave the rest of for when we go into the other questions. But it's great to have all of you. I'm so happy to see one of the person who really inspires us a lot into this work, Benita. It would be good to hear from you.
Good.
Yes.
Thank you, Omati. Good. So I'm Benita Harris. So I'm listed here virtually. That's really my legitimate first name, but not the one I usually use. I've been actually spending this 16 days and actually prior to it, COVID-19, trying to find different ways that we could as effectively or more effectively reach out to people who are affected by gender-based violence. So I've been looking for resources, what people are doing and how they are doing it, and trying to share it with people who are working in the field. That's one thing. The second thing that has been occupying my mind during this period is that when we talk about gender-based violence, the focus is still too much on girls and women. That girls and women are the major victims, but we need to pay attention to the main perpetrators. And one of the ways of preventing violence against girls and women is really to get to it at the root. And part of getting to it at the root has to do with how we raise boys and how we raise men in our society. And part of what we have to start doing, we've started it, but we're not, boys and men are still almost an afterthought. We say we focus on girls and women, and then we add boys and men. Boys and men have to be central to this whole work that we are doing. I would like to see us to work with perpetrators to see what are the factors that made them into perpetrators of violence. We also have to work with enablers. And among enablers, we see both women and men, mothers and female caregivers sometimes become enablers or are not in a situation to actually do anything to prevent or remedy gender-based violence. And I think that is something that we need to focus on. So when we think of gender, we have to stop focusing only on girls and women and recognize there are many on the gender spectrum that are involved with, are victimized by, and are also perpetrators of gender-based violence. So
Yes, thank
again,
you
that's
so
what I
much.
want to say for the time being.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Benita. So we had a little bit more ice, a bit more of a cherry on top of the cake when Benita gave her bid there. So thank you so much for that, Benita. Thanks to my panel for introducing yourself. And you know, there are so many discussions surrounding the issue of violence against women and girls and gender-based violence. And so the first thing, could we first speak about, you know, what are some of the common factors within the families, communities, and society by large that basically leads to violence against women and girls? And at this point, anyone can respond to the questions.
May I make a suggestion, right? Instead of saying anyone, I think you have to target somebody and force them to come out, right? So that we don't have so much downtime. Good. So just call somebody by name. Good.
Okay, so we can start with you, Miss Dean.
Go ahead.
I suppose what the evidence at Blossom is showing is that there's a lot of insecurities in our society. So there's a lot of, how can I say this? We are parented to believe that violence is part of the solution. You know, so in school, as children, we learn if you do something that in the eyes of the adults is incorrect, you get licks in the Guyanese term. You then go to school and you get more licks if you get something wrong. The teacher tells your parents about this and you get more licks. So we are basically socialized that in order to solve problems or how we even cope with things is to administer licks. And growing up with that kind of mentality and that environment can only really create more and more and more violence. And I think we have to start seeing, you know, from the beginning, licks as violence. You know, and this links into all the issue with corporal punishment that we're so rooted in and that we're determined must remain a part of our school system and a part of our home system. So it's understanding that licks and lashes and tapping equals violence. And once we start to refer to it in that way, maybe we can begin to have a conversation as to how we can root out this violence in our society.
And if I can just add to what Ayo is saying, violence, it's a complex issue. And it's a complex issue with a variety of, or an interplay of various factors. And it's not clearly understood. It's not clearly understood. What I do believe, and coming from the Guyana Women's Health and Life Experiences survey report that we conducted, the very first prevalence report in 2018, it makes some really bold references to the normalization of violence. And Ayo spoke of just one aspect. So we normalize beating children when they misbehave, but we abhor when adults beat other adults. We seem to accept it in other facets in society. For example, we're driving our cars and somebody cuts across in front of us, we get into a road rage. And other forms. So it seems to be normalized. It seems to be accepted on some fronts. It seems to be unacceptable on other fronts. And it's very worrying. It's very worrying because we are really teaching our children to become violent as adults. And I support what Benita has been saying, that we have to work with perpetrators. And many times we tend to identify only male perpetrators, but we have women, females, who are also perpetrators of violence towards not only their partners, but also towards their own children. So I believe that when we have this conversation, we need to first acknowledge that all forms of violence, it's condemned. All forms of violence. It's condemned. Thank you.
I do agree. Sorry, go ahead, Akhtar.
No, just I would like to compliment what evidence shows. UNICEF conducted a study in Guyana on social norms relating to sexual, emotional, physical violence, and 73% of respondents feel that is a normal, acceptable, to controlling and managing children. It shows the mindset we have towards the violence, because it's all about what kind of mindset we have. If we are accepting as a means to control and manage children, also learn the same control and manage children, and it becomes intergenerational. One generation will learn from other generation, and they will behave in same way to their kids, their children in when they grow up. So we have to draw a line. What is the positive disciplining? What is violent disciplining? What kind of behavior should be accepted? And what are the big behaviors which cannot be accepted, whether it's a parents, whether it's a teachers, or either family members? Because if we don't identify those behaviors, or if we don't draw a line, it will be ongoing forever. So it's important that we segregate those behaviors, and we give a clear message. These are acceptable. These are not acceptable. The world is changing very fast. We may not be treating our kids, our children in the same fashion. What we have been treated, what our grandfathers have been treated, because we are living in a changing context. There is a different way of living in changing context. Pardon me, I think it's too much echoing. I'm listening my voice. So we have to, world is changing very fast. We are living in a changing world. We cannot live with those norms and practices which our fathers, forefathers, and grandfathers have been facing, and we continue to practice those things. I think it's important that we come up, we raise our voice against those actions, those behaviors which are really creating, intergenerational challenges for children.
I quite agree with those points, and Akila identifying how complex these issues are in the community. You may have noticed it in her work as well, where we have children reporting sexual violence, and the parents, the mom, sexual violence, and in some cases you recognize that the child is being, in some families, the child is being badly treated at home, being beaten. The mom is being treated in the same fashion. And then the grandmother, in some families where we go into the community, it's a generational violence all happening in the same household. And so we have to ensure that we are identifying these very clearly, and really outlining how they're contributing to the cycle of violence. So parenting is really critical on how we prevent violence. When we look at some of the position paper that we've done, one we did in 2017 on child neglect, what it identified that children by the age of 11, 12 are left alone by themselves and sort of experience a level of abandonment. And so even as they get into teenage years and they get into relationship, if they're experiencing any difficulty, they're not enough of a connection with an adult that they can seek help from someone that will support them. And so we find for some of the teenage girls who then left home early and gone into a relationship and are being ill-treated and being beaten within that relationship, they have difficulty getting out of it because there's not enough support at the level of the family. There's been a broken down in that relationship, and these are some of the complexities that that women and girls And even men and boys who are experiencing these violence don't really know how to respond to it, don't know where to find help, or don't find it very easy to connect to any form of help that is available.
And even if I can just jump in here a bit to add, you know, we're having this conversation about violence, about gender based violence. And many times we seem to just center on women and girls, as we keep saying. But how many times do we consider the violence that the elderly persons or senior citizens experience? Those persons who live alone and have to rely on caregivers, relatives to take care of them, as we would say, collect the pension books and don't, use it in a way it's intended for persons living with disabilities, So even violence within our workplaces, we don't have these conversations, and all constitute gender-based violence. Street harassment is another area that we need to really touch on when we're talking holistically. So we need to continue these conversations and ensure that all the vulnerable and at-risk groups are covered and catered for, because I agree with Bonita. Everything has been about women and girls, and we've been excluding. What about persons from the LGBTQ communities who've been facing violence, intimate partner violence? So we need to continue having these discourses to ensure that no one certainly is left behind.
Thank you so much for that, Ms. Doris. Before we move ahead, I'm going to just kindly ask everyone to mute their microphones when someone else is speaking or presenting, right? So thank you so much for that. There were a number of issues brought up. Okay.
Yeah. Yes. Let me speak before you go.
Sure. Sure.
Okay. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? No. Okay.
Yes, we're hearing you, Bonita. Go right ahead.
You're muted now, Bonita.
You're mute. Can you unmute?
I'm good?
Yes.
Okay. I want to pick up on some of the points made about corporal punishment. Right? I agree with all of those points. But part of what I want to say is that we should simplify what is violence. So people shouldn't be getting away with saying that violence is complex. Violence is violence, and violence needs to be separated from discipline. Violence is really undisciplined behavior. Violence can't be disciplined. So we go back to the original meaning of the word, and derivation of the word discipline comes from the word disciple, right? So that in the family, we hear, I believe, and I've said before, that corporal punishment is actually a bridge to sexual violence. Because if you are hitting your child and then somebody is stroking your child, we talk about good touch, bad touch. So the child, right, the kind of grooming and touch that is involved, at least initially, right, in sexual violence, right, is not unpleasant. So that is what confuses the child, So the mother says, I love you, whoop, 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 right? And the father, the stepfather, the uncle, or the big brother, or somebody says, oh, you're beautiful, let me make you feel good, and that kind of thing. The child does not have the mental capacity and the maturity to understand what is going on. Now, when you are a mother that beats your child is not going to say, Mommy, Daddy did so-and-so to me, because the first thing she knows is so-and-so is a bad thing. And she, as the person without power in the relationship and in the family, is the one who's going to have to pay. So she is not going to report what is happening to her, even if she understands what is happening to her. That is number one. The second thing is that when we focus a lot on preventing violence, we don't focus on the giving of love, the showing of affection, the kind of taking care of children, to understand what caregiving means. Caregiving does not mean hitting or hurting, So that part of what we need to do in order to eradicate violence or make violence less and less people's go-to thing is actually begin to focus, particularly with our boy children, because a lot of our boy children don't get hugs and they don't get good touch. One of the reasons that boys are actually more attracted to early sexual activity sometimes is the only time they experience good touch. So that if we raise our boy children with more love and affection and that kind of thing, and we keep close to them and keep them close to us, right? We can actually begin to meet their needs for love and affection so that it is not met with sexual abuse or early sex. And they don't see the ability when they are older or bigger or have more resources to use violence as a means to exercise their power, exercise their dependency, escape from family situations and that kind of thing. So I would like us, I know uh, it's not acceptable. We're talking about love and friendship and that kind of thing and this kind of thing, but I think we need to have that as part of this work against violence. They talk now about it's better to get people to sign on to a positive norm than to work against a negative norm. And a positive norm is love and affection and care and those kinds of things. And so I wanted to actually just add that to the discussion.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for that, Big Miss Harris. And thank you to my panel for their responses also. There have been a number of issues raised. Our panel would have mentioned so much about social norms, but what we would like to do now, what I'd like to do now is basically to identify some of those harmful norms that serves as a driving force for violence against women and girls. Again, there's no particular order in which I'd like you to read.
You've muted yourself,
I'm
Peter.
sorry. Yes, but I'd like to ask you to go first, Miss Doris.
Sure, no problem. And this is coming from, again, the Guyana Women's Health and Life Experiences Survey. And one of the harmful norms is that a lot of women believe that it is the wife's obligation to have sex with their husband. The wife should not or cannot withdraw or withdraw sex from their husbands, and this places women in such a vulnerable position, because not being able to negotiate what you do with your own body, that is detrimental to that woman, and it removes her personal agency. Another norm that came out from the survey is that a woman's most important role is to take care of her home. And we've been seeing this over the years. It's natural that men should be the head of the home, and a wife should always obey her husband, even if she disagrees. All right, even if she disagrees. If she goes out without telling him, well, then the violence is justified. If she gets a little slap or hit or so on, it's justified because she didn't tell him. If she neglects the children, well, yes, that is a ground for her to get what she deserves. If she argues back, that's another norm that suggests that the violence is justified. If she burns the food, we've been hearing this over and over and over. And if he suspects she has an outside relationship, well, that will be the end of her. So these are just some of the norms coming out from the survey. And this survey, this was a national survey, and it quite a number of women were interviewed, and this was what the women themselves said. They themselves said that they agreed that these norms justify the violence that they experience.
Thank you, Ms. Doris. Next.
Yeah. I think some other social norms and expectations that we have of men to provide and take care. When they cannot provide, right? We actually make them feel small. So many men, particularly men who do not live with their child mothers and their children, don't even go because if they know they can't show up with some money or things, right? Don't even go. Some of the other social norms, in addition to what Akila mentioned, is that how we raise our girl children. You know, I read once that we should raise girl children more like boys, independent, being able to take care of themselves, stand up for themselves, speak up for themselves, and raise our boys more like girls, soft, feminine, sweet, you know, because really what we need to do is identify human norms, human values, human attributes, right? And actually build that both in our girl children and our boy children, rather than focus on the gender norms which have existed from time immemorial, which is what we are following now. And because we do not give, I saw the men's group. I thought I saw them. They're supposed to be here. So part of what we have to do is help men, because we have the experience of developing many women's organizations, children organizations. I think we have to bring more men into social work, more men into counseling, more men into sharing their own experiences with growing up, more men to discuss their expectations within a marriage, the expectations of male partner, expectations of father, expectations of mother, so people know what they're signing it up for. But we don't have any of these conversations, you know. So everybody's into repeating the old social norms, and we still can move beyond that to more pro-social norms, right? So that we could be on the same page. So I would really like us to stop focusing on the negative. We know what we need to do to kind of move forward and start doing more of that, right? And less of harping on the negative, which actually turns people off. You know, a lot of men, soon as they see a set of women get together, have a discussion, they believe that they're in for male bashing. Right. So that the whole way in which we conduct these discussions, and just make sure that there are more and more informed men who are part of these discussions, I think will help to move us forward. So another thing, the UNICEF rep mentioned generational violence, and I think that is extremely important. But one of the things we also have to look at is prenatal violence, the violence to the child, whether it's in the mother's womb, right? When we know that a lot of violence to women happens when they're pregnant, and for some reason the man or the father does not want a child or whatever is happening, a lot of hormones are involved. So there's a lot of attacks on the mother, and these attacks actually affect the unborn child because the stress hormones that the mother produces, that the child produces to deal with that continues throughout life. So part of looking at the whole spectrum of when violence occurs throughout the life cycle, a lot of prenatal violence actually exists that we need to begin to address.
Thank you, Benita.
If I can say,
Mhm.
yeah, I think it was well articulated by Madam Harris, but other norms if we see in a bigger picture is social roles played by men and women, boys and girls in a family, in a society. Uh, you know, still there is a mindset, defined traditional roles to be played by women and men at home. While in a evolving society, the role has changed a lot in terms of, you know, in the tradition, maybe it was like women will work at home, they will manage households, and men will work outside. But in the contrary, now everything is changing. Women are working outside, they are professionals, they are dealing with the day-to-day business, but expectation again is same to be playing the role at home, and whereby there is some kind of conflict between the family, between the men and women. So I think there is also a need to unpack the social roles of men and women, boys and girls in family, in communities and societies. And we have to demystify those traditional roles which are no more existing but is a norm, uh, to influence, to lead to gender-based violence. Because following those norms, I think we have to break those norms and make a reality that no, we are living in a modern society, and everybody has to play a different role, and those roles should be well recognized, appreciated, and those roles should be given dignity as a mother, as a sister, as a wife, but not to be driven by so-called traditional norms which are very harmful now. Thank you.
Mr. Mati, you can, yeah, you can go.
Thanks. Ayo, I think you were going to make a point. You want to go right ahead? Okay, you're muted, Ayo. Are you hearing her, Shakita?
No, I'm not here.
Even I cannot hear you.
Sorry, yes, I'm on.
Even I cannot hear you.
Yes, I was saying clearly our call to action here is that we have to have more awareness sessions and more education, not just with children, but also with adults on how, with examples on what is considered so-called good behaviors or bad behaviors. We have to start teaching both groups that this is how you can interact in a more positive way with each other. We have to talk about respecting each other. We have to talk about even the language that we use when talking to each other. There's a lot of things that we do as a norm in Guyanese society that is really, it's really not normal. It's not normal. So again, for me, we have to start with the language that we use with each other. We have to stop, we have to be more encouraging. We have to learn what I call is the sandwich effect, how to compliment people, say something good, then encourage them, and then continue on with something good. Instead of always leaning towards where you have to put someone down or towards, being quite negative all the time. So in our language, I think it's very important for us to start that dialogue in having good language when we speak to each other. So, following on from beneath that, we need some kind of call to action and not focus so much on the negative. Let's look at how we can empower both boys and girls and men and women in how to relate better to each other.
Yeah, and I think in that empowerment is really how we help children. We've seen quite a number in the cases here take the room, not just to murder the woman, but in that process they themselves it speaks to so many other issues there, and coming back to us, helping children to learn some simple ways of resolving conflicts and learning to manage and to cope with challenges and to seeking out help. One of the norms that we know that women themselves are driven by is putting the family at shame. And so we got to help more women who find help faster, to receive help faster, so that more women are encouraged to reach, and women are recognizing that seeking out help, reporting, seeking out a service is not shameful. It's protecting yourself, it's protecting your families, it's stopping the violence. So there are many other areas that we need to identify on how norms are sort of driving and and keeping violence within the family and within the community, where it's a bit more difficult to get help and to find solutions.
Yes. Thank you so much for that, Umati. We have so many questions here today, and um, we just spoke about the harmful norms. Okay, sorry, I see Benita's indicated that she likes to speak. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Your mic is mute. Mhm.
I good. I appreciated the letter from Khadija on behalf of Childing, which talked about the importance of child rights so that children then grow up understanding that they have rights as adults. I had never thought about that. It was a very, very good point. And this social norm that we all have rights, including small human beings, male and female human beings. And if that starts off early, those children will go into adolescence and adults who understand the concept of rights and that they have rights. That's one thing. The second thing is I would like to see some of this discussion kind of move from experts and specialists in this area to kind of ordinary people who we encourage to talk about their experiences, both negative and positive, and what they could now do, having had negative experiences with respect to violence as children. So when you move people to kind of actually put language to their thoughts and feelings about how they were raised, right? And particularly do this in a kind of public sphere, right? We can actually help to move those norms a little forward. And the third thing that I want to say is just like, for example, in Starbucks News has this women's page where women talk very openly, right, about some of the issues. I think we should have some version of a men's page where men talk about their experiences with reproduction, with birth, with childhood, with adolescence, and that kind of thing, so that boys and men's voices are facilitated to come to play. So they begin in the way in which we have been doing as women since the gender focus actually started, right? So you give men, right, and others on the gender spectrum a platform to share their thoughts and feelings so that the rest of us could be more aware of what is going on in more than half of the rest of the population.
Mhm. Thank you so much, Benita, and everyone else. There's a common belief that a lot of women within our communities they tend to feel as though there's nowhere for me to go or no one for me to talk to. Who do I approach about what I am facing? So I'd like to ask my panel. Do women and girls who have been abused have easy access to services?
I think one of the things that we have recognized is that, particularly for girls who've been abused, what they need is not just the access, but they need an advocate. They need someone who is going to hold their hand and take them through the whole process, because they have been violated in itself. It's so traumatizing. And sometimes, and it's in many instances, the family members don't necessarily recognize and know how traumatizing it is for the child, and that level of support is not there. And so we need more advocates at the level of the community. Like, every woman should aim to be an advocate for another woman or another child, another boy child, another girl child, and to just support that child through not just go reporting, but even if they're having a difficulty with another child, or even if they're having a difficulty with a next door neighbor. We need more advocates across our society that supports it, that we receive that support at an individual level, to be able to seek out the services, to be able to go through the services with us.
And if I can just say, before Bonita continues, I would go a step further Omati, to assess the institutional's readiness to provide these services and the availability of services. And even coming out from the survey, more than half or 50% of the respondents, they indicated they did not reach out to the formal service providers. And there were several reasons for that. Unavailable services, maybe where the services were located geographically, was not convenient for them to be able to access. Maybe services did not target their specific need or the specific group. Maybe the time it took to access these services, lengthy waiting periods, maybe a cost was attached to these services. So I think that we really need to look on a systemic level to see what really we're providing. I think we need to be very honest and transparent about it. And then we need to, of course, in a coordinated way with our partners, we need to be able to fill some of those gaps. I do believe it's a systemic problem. I know that we're working towards addressing that on various levels, but then we seem to put a lot of pressure on vulnerable persons reaching out to services. And even where services are available, can we afford these persons the dignity and the respect and the confidentiality and the privacy to encourage them to even come forward to access these services that we provide? Or do we dehumanize them? Or do we judge them? Do we place stereotypes on them to deter them? And I think we really need to continue having this conversation to understand from the survivor's perspective, why don't you access these services? Many times when we talk about the survivor-centered approach, it's exactly what Benita is saying, that the experts make a determination about what the survivors need, as opposed to seeking or allowing the survivor to identify for themselves and steer their own journey towards being healed, towards overcoming the violence and so on.
Okay, I'll have a go here as well. Now, with regards to services being easily available, I think the terrain of Guyana does not, or as yet, we're not able to meet a lot of women, a lot of men, a lot of boys, a lot of girls in a protective way. Also, Akili, you talked a lot about the systemic issues, and that is correct. Because for me, and which comes out in the numbers and in conversations in Blossom, is that we have a literacy issue in Guyana. And something as simple as a call-in, a line, a hotline. A hotline is 7 digits long. We have to reconsider that. We need to make it an emergency line, 3 digits long. You know, we have a lot of migrants now in the country. We have so many people, and more importantly, we have children, and we need children to be able to access help. And for them to access help, it must be easy. So a number that they can remember, for me, is the first step, is a step in helping to protect them. Also, for me, I wonder a lot about the use of the term survivors. And this is a discussion I think Bonita and I have had many times. In my experience, we do not have many survivors. We are still very much victims. So, and we need to first address the fact that we have victims and teach the victims, they have to come out on the other side as survivors before we can even start talking about how do we help a survivor, because we haven't actually dealt with the victim. You know, so for me, this is something I feel very passionate about. And I think in Guyana, as it pertains to Guyana, we have to hold that word victim so that we can start to address our issues here and to help to give people the coping skills necessary to become survivors. I've also experienced a lot of victims are working in the roles of advocates or working in the roles of having to be protectors, and they're not in a position to be protectors as yet. So again, a lot of awareness and a lot of education and a lot of therapeutic services and a lot of professionals, you know, are needed, and a lot of professionals who are qualified to provide that service, because unfortunately we're still in a place where we think anybody can do a social services role. And indeed, not everyone can do a social services role. It is a qualification that needs to be respected and needs to be treated in that way. And these are some of the things that we need in order to move forward and be able to offer better services and more informed services, more evidence-based services, more research-based services for our women and our girls. Yeah, over to you.
Yes, Akhtar.
Yeah, no, I would like to go back to Madam Omati mentioned and what Madam Ayo mentioned about when we talk about access to services. I think it's a basket of different services into when we are talking about a victim. Legal services, medical services, psychosocial
Yes.
services. But beyond that, what Madam Omati was mentioning, to create enabling environment at community level.
Mm-hmm.
You have to create a support system in the community, but that is the first entry point to access any services. And where there is a lot of issues, related to destigmatizing still we say there are a lot of stigmas, as it was mentioned that reporting is low. Maybe there are many things, because of the stigma, because of the distance, because of they are not no action is being taken by the authority. So there are many issues, but if we have an enabling environment, we have a supportive community based system that will empower the victim to go and report and access the services. So I believe here the role of CSOs and community based organization is also very vital to bridge the gap and to bring the services at the local level, to bring the services to the victims who can access easily with comfort, with dignity, with respect. Because when they're going to access the services, there are different layer channels, and every channel has its own bottlenecks and barriers. And it further add to those, psychosocial trauma they have. So I think we have to, one of the actions we need to reimagine is how best we can decentralize those kind of services. If we can bring those services community level, and already some of the organizations are working in remote areas, they don't have to go to service. A service should come to them. That should be the bottom line, why we should wait that somebody is coming to access services. As a service provider, as a responsible authority and citizen, we should provide services to them and we should bring to them. And I think we need to find ways to engage, to create more platform through CSOs, through community-based organizations, with resources, with capacity building, with trainings, with materials, so they are able to provide services very easily and in acceptable manner. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Yes, Benita.
Yes, I think the quick answer to your initial question is that they're not enough. If you look at the level of violence and the level of services, right? We know we're not having enough services for the side access to deal with the level of violence. We know that these services are almost not present in the hinterland communities where there's a lot of violence, a lot of it is not even reported. So we don't even have correct data on the amount of violence, right, in those communities that are remote from Georgetown. The second is that we have to, this whole question of victim, survivor, I think some more discussion about that is important. We have to give actually Help and Shelter credit, right, for actually introducing the term survivor when the only category was victim. Right? And I think that was a step forward. But we now have to move it a step forward because we were not put on this earth really to survive, right? So really we should be moving towards getting people who have experienced these terrible experiences as children and adolescents to move them to a position where they can actually heal and actually thrive. But we have to remember the point that Ayo made, that we have a lot of victims parading as survivors when they are still victims. And if we look at most of our perpetrators have also become victims, right? Have also been victims in a previous period of their life, because the movement from being a victim to a perpetrator, right, is a very easy movement. This is why, for example, so many children who were beaten as children believe that this was good for them, and they become beaters when they become parents. So victims will become perpetrators. Maybe we need, instead of separating victims, perpetrators, enablers, and these categories, everybody is to use the term that we use during HIV, infected and affected by violence. So if some of these community, and I agree with the community services, right? And except with the community services, we have to again use one of the strategies used by HIV, where we have to train peer counselors, peer educators, right, who they may not meet professional standards in terms of social work, but they have some basic skills and some basic techniques and a program of working with them. Many of the faith-based organizations offer counseling, but we know that many of their counseling is based on some of these social norms we're talking about. You shouldn't break up a marriage, violence is okay, and those kinds of things, so that with the faith-based organizations that offer counseling for violence, right? We get this basic skills and some basic techniques and a program.
Yes.
Okay, yes, that's some feedback, right? So I think that that is something we need to look at. The other thing in terms of the calling that Ayo mentioned, this is a place where experts and expertise can go every now and again. Some of us have to start calling in these calling numbers just to see what is going on. Is there somebody at the end of that line, right? Where are they coming from, so that they also have to be monitored by citizens group, just to make sure that they're offering the services that they say they're offering. And the final point on this is that many of the counselors and social workers who work with women and girls who've been violated and others who've been violated themselves actually need care, right? So we need to have some caring for caregivers, so that these persons, usually working not for a high wage, usually with issues of their own, issues of violence, either past or current violence. And many of those, right, have not been attended to in their past, and it keeps raising up. So we also have to take that into consideration when we look at the 16 days of violence. So you have to care for the caregivers. We have to do a lot more prevention work. We have to extend the victims to other categories of persons, right? And we have to begin focusing more on men and boys and others on the gender spectrum.
Okay. Yes. Thank you so much for that, Benita. We are a bit pressed for time. So in the interest of time, I'm just going to ask my panel to briefly respond to this question with regards to families and at the grassroots level. What what are some of the bigger roles for us as civil society to create a change, on how women and girls are protected from violence?
Nobody speaking. Every organization in this country needs to have a set of counselors assigned to it to deal with these issues, right? So if you go there, so all schools, all hospitals, all workplaces, every place where people are gathered and employed or engaged in sports or what have you, right? We need to have counselors assigned to those things. And then advocacy that Umati spoke about, and the access that you raised earlier. You then work on advocacy and access in every place. And this allows the to be a community response. So we regard every place where people are not just geographical communities, but workplace communities, faith-based communities, wherever people live, work, and have their being, should be staffed with counselors, right? So I think that will go a long way, right, to help to actually prevent and reduce the level of violence that actually we're facing.
And to add to what Bonita is saying, I strongly believe that the opportunity exists for us to have a multi-sectoral integrated referral mechanism in place. As a service provider, um, we may not be aware of all the services that are available, and we have to find a way to be able to navigate victims and survivors and other categories of persons requiring our assistance. We have to be able to find a way to navigate them through the helping process towards overcoming whatever challenges that they have. I would personally like to see a more coordinated approach in terms of how we communicate with each other. It seems as if we operate in silos. Sometimes it appears as if we are in competition with each other. And given that we know there's a paucity of resources and services to be able to address all of these needs of victims and survivors, then we need to work together. This cannot be, oh, this is the responsibility of government only, or oh, the civil society organizations should drive this process. We have to start thinking that all of us need to be on board, and not just being on board attending meetings and committing verbally to doing work, but have an integrated mechanism. So we are embarking right now on establishing a national hotline, 914 IADELI, the 3-digit number. There's still quite a lot we have to tweak, because we don't want it to be just referring persons. We want to have a follow-up mechanism in place. We want to be able to provide an advocate to every victim or survivor to help them navigate this process. So we're embarking on that. So we would love to have, and it doesn't matter who starts the process. It doesn't matter who starts the process. Once we all recognize and understand that we all have a role to play, I think that will be a step forward in the right direction.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think for us as civil society organizations, where we have a little bit more capacity also to access resources, we need to look at how we bring the grassroots agencies, those that are working directly on the ground, a little bit more to the table. We have a couple of persons here. I think I see Miss Parvati, who is working in the Wales community, and when we met her, she was an activist and a retired head teacher shortly after that. And our collaboration with her has and her connecting with other grassroots organizations, she has taken forward setting up a grassroots group and really doing a lot of work in her community. And where we can, we support her to access some resources. So there aren't many community-based groups. They might be through the faith agencies. They may be just communities, camaraderie. They may just be maybe school teachers within some of the communities. We need to find those groups. We need to provide them with some bit of training, some bit of materials that they can be a bit more equipped to take on the role that is needed at the community level.
For civil society, I would like to see more role in two ways. One is being present upstream and downstream, putting one feet on the ground where we see the system cannot reach, and that I have been talking bridging the gap. And second is to put other feet to influence the policy and plans at national level, because these are the true roles I think civil society can play very pragmatically. And also the third role, which I believe that CSOs have access to, communities, to the people. It will be good to generate real-time data on those issues in the area we are working. That will really help to design very evidence-based, research-based, what I mentioned, to develop interventions. And also at the same time, this is a normal syndrome, sometimes there is duplication of the work. Many organizations, we work the same areas for same themes. I think we need to identify different roles, a unique position of each CSO organization, and there should be less, competitive but healthy competition to bring a positive change and achieving more results. And also another thing I was thinking that for CSO, or which, especially for those organizations which are well established and they have very good reputation, they have a good organizational capacity, they should not be in activity mode. They should come up with a very kind of comprehensive plan what they are going to do in 1 or 2 years, and against that backdrop they can start working with different partners, mobilizing resources, finding different supporters to work on that one. Because if we are always in activity mode, this is disconnect. We are never able to see the bigger picture. So I think it will be good to see what are the niche and competitive advantage of that particular organization, and what they can do in long term, what are their plans, and how does it fit into national plan of action, which is compliant to the government's plan, and also how international organizations, UN organization, can support those overall plans. I think this is some of the recommendation I would like to suggest in this meeting. Thank you.
Mhm. Thank you so much, Mr. Akhtar. At this time, I would like to briefly give anyone who may have a question or a suggestion. You can now use this time to say your name and ask your question. Is there anyone who would like to ask a question or make a statement or so? Okay. Okay. So far there's no one. Okay, so we won't press it any further. We are already over time, so I'd like to ask my panel before we're going to wrap things up here to basically to give a final remark, if there's any, to wrap up the discussion that we're having today on preventing violence against women and girls. Any final remarks?
I mean, gender-based violence, as I mentioned, is not acceptable, is not justifiable, is preventable. That should be the tagline for us as a team, as different stakeholders to play our roles. Another is, I will go to Madam Akila, that 16 days of activism does not stop now. It is a beginning. The activism should start now to look forward how best we can deal with this critical situation in our society, in our communities, in this country. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much.
And just to leave with you, the Ministry of Human Services and Social Security, we are always open to collaboration with our partners. We've enjoyed, and we continue to enjoy an ongoing relationship with our CSOs represented here. And we are extremely grateful to the UNICEF Guyana office, because they've been supporting us throughout the years in so many tangible ways that has afforded us the opportunity to be able to do to do a lot of what it is that we're doing here. And if nothing else, I will take away from what Irfan said, is the need for us really to have a comprehensive national plan, national prevention and response plan that addresses all forms of gender-based violence. I know that there is a national mechanism in place. We will be reaching out to our partners to ensure that they are involved from the inception, and we're committed to working with everyone. Remember, everyone deserves to live a life that's free from violence, and it's our role to ensure that we preserve this right of every human being. Thank you for the opportunity of being here.
And on behalf of Blossom as well, thank you for inviting me here. And we will repeat or reinforce that all sexual and gender-based violence, it is preventable, and there are people out there working passionately to ensure that systems work and that we are able to meet those hard to reach areas. Of course, there's lots more work to be done, But I think we have begun that work. And I think we have to recognize that there have been positive moves. The decentralization of the child advocacy centers. We are now in 8 regions in Guyana. The fact that we have 3 sexual offenses courts, we have a children's court, we have a family court. These are things that we need to celebrate and we have to continue doing more of. There's lots more work to be done, but we have started that journey. So we are also looking forward to the National Plan of Action and to contributing and being a part of that process, because at the end of the day, I think we all want the same thing, which is to end violence against all members of our society. Mm-hmm.
I'd like to give the final word to Benita. So I'll quickly say that indeed it was really good to be able to do this with our partners, the support of everyone here that really is happening across the many regions. As Ayers mentioned, there's so many new services and so many agencies and so many new grassroots organizations that are reaching out to families. And so I want to say to women and girls, men and boys, that more and more the reports are coming in. We are receiving more reports, and I want to encourage you to report, because when you report, you do set that tradition of saying violence stops with my generation. And so we want to encourage you to continue to report and try to be an advocate for someone who is reporting. Over to Benita.
Put me on the line. Okay, 3 final things I want to say. 2 I've already said before. One is that every perpetrator started off life as a victim, right? So, right, if we can actually make sure that, there's no beating, there's no corporal punishment, right? We are going to reduce the amount of violence in our society. The second thing is that the majority of violence in this country is violence against children. And the majority of people who bring violence against children are actually women, mothers, grandmothers, aunties, big sisters, and the female teachers. So that when we stereotype and stigmatize men as the main perpetrators of violence, right, we are doing them a disservice. I know this is not a popular position to take. My first work actually in the NGO movement and civil society was with Red Thread, so I've done a lot of work with women's organizations, right? And many of those women, right, who suffer violence are themselves perpetrators of violence against children. And we have to be able to say that, right, without being embarrassed. And the third thing, I know UNICEF has more clout with the government and we civil society people do. And one important step is if the government can outlaw corporal punishment in the schools and in the institutions, including institutions that take care of children. Because we know the New Opportunity Corps, we know that many of the state agencies where they look after children, we know that the police, when children come in, there's a lot of violence against children and against other people in state institutions. And the state could lead the way by banning and preventing and monitoring so that it stops. And then the state will be in a better position to ensure that violence generally, violence against children, violence against women and girls in other sectors of the society, it will have more clout if the state comes out very, very firmly against it. So I'm hoping, Irfan, that there's something that UNICEF can do and use as resources to kind of make. We've been talking about this a long, long time in this country, but really y'all are the only people with actually clout over the government. We don't have too much clout. We could work with them and we do work with them, but clout we do not have. Blessings, and thank you for inviting me to be part of this panel.
Okay. Ms. Akhtar, would you like to say something?
No, I think I take this opportunity to thank Child Ling to bring us together. This was a very enriching discussion, and at least we have opportunity to listen to the government, to CSOs, and also UN agency representation. And as we mentioned that we are one team, and we have to see how we can support each other. And UNICEF is UNICEF remains committed to support our partner under the leadership of Madam Akila and all CSO partners. I was having a discussion with Madam Omati that we have been challenged with the pandemic in 2020, but we hope that 2020 is going to be promising and rewarding, and we need to reimagine how best we can support each other. And we are a standby, and in fact, we have our mandate, and that we have to empower civil society organizations. We have to work with civil society organizations to reach where we cannot reach easily, so that no one is left behind in the decade of action of SDGs. So role of CSOs, all partners are very important, very close to me. I worked in CSOs, so I know how important they are. And so, Madam Harris, looking forward to meeting you also in one-to-one session sometime.
Blessings.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Yes, so I'd like to say thank you to our panel, Ms. Doris, Mr. Akhtar, Ms. Majore, Ms. Dean, and even to you, Ms. Harris, for joining us today. And to you, Ms. Harris, my apologies for joining us today and sharing with us. I really hope that everyone tuned in would have really keenly listened, and I would advise you to share the information that you would have gathered from this discussion. So once again, thank you so much to my panel for joining me, and to everyone who tuned in. Do take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.